The Cormani McClain saga is finally going to come to an end in 11 days, and here's why.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno, your host. I'm a University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and contributor to allhurricanes.com. And thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. So Cormani McClain, who played in the Under Armour All America game, he does not like talking to reporters. He did have to talk to some reporters at certain points throughout the week, including right before and right after the game itself on Tuesday. And when you're talking about when this saga is going to wrap up, I don't know if there's a better source on Cormani McClain than Cormani himself. And he has said it now repeatedly over the last week and a half at least, that he is going to be quote unquote signing on January 15th. He told that to Manny Navarro of The Athletic shortly after the early signing period came and went, and he said it on national live television on ESPN2 right after the Under Armour All America game yesterday. Cormani McClain says he's going to be signing on January 15th, whether that will be with Miami, who he's been verbally committed to since late October, or if Coach Prime at Colorado or Alabama or, some other wild card out there is trying to flip him. That is yet to be determined. But he says he's going to be signing on January 15th. That detail in itself is a strange one because you cannot in January sign a football national letter of intent, which is the agreement that binds you to a football program, right? He had a window to do that between December 21st and December 23rd, and he didn't sign to Miami where he was verbally committed during that window. The next time you can sign a national letter of intent is February 1st. So what's all this talk about January 15th? Well, one possibility, and this is probably what he's talking about, is even though you can't sign the football letter of intent, you are able to, in January, sign a grant in aid agreement, which is the academic part of the scholarship agreement with the school of your choice. So perhaps that's what he's talking about signing, where he can sign and enroll at Miami or wherever else on January 15th, even though he can't sign the football national letter of intent until February 1st. I also expect on January 15th, he's going to have a ceremony. Because remember, he had a ceremony all set up for him at Lakeland High School back on December 21st. And for whatever reason, that morning, his mother revealed he will not be at that ceremony. And his cake was not eaten by him. His orange and green cake was half eaten by other people who showed up to the ceremony, even though he did not. So I think that's what McClain is talking about when he says signing on January 15th. And, that's when I expect he's going to either put on the Miami hat one final time and put all the rumors to bed, or the grand conspiracy theory that so many have out there is that Coach Prime has been working this behind the scenes and he's been building up the drama because he wants Cormani McClain in 2023 to be what Travis Hunter was for him at Jackson State back in 2022. And this is just the way Coach Prime likes to do it. That's a long-standing theory out there that people have. So here's what went down yesterday. Probably any of you who are watching this and listening to this right now saw the interview that McClain did on TV, which was very awkward. Part of that is just McClain's personality. He's just not really that comfortable and outspoken with the media. I think that's important context to remember here. But yeah, when McClain was being interviewed on ESPN, they did ask him about his recruitment. And even though the only school that he mentioned was Miami, didn't mention any other school by name, still, his body language, the way he chuckled, the way he smiled, awkwardly made Miami fans, in a weird way, less confident that Cormani is actually coming rather than more confident, because all the body language experts are weighing in and, oh, it looks like he's trolling. That's what a lot of people were saying, right? Now, I have it, meanwhile, because even though ESPN, that interview was the one that everybody saw, he did talk to some other media members yesterday, including a friend and colleague of mine. I have it on very good authority that Deion Sanders calls Cormani McClain literally every day. My colleague Brian Smith covered Cormani in person at Under Armour All America, and he spoke to McClain one-on-one yesterday on Tuesday. And guys, before, and I know that there are probably a lot of non-Miami fans watching this because you're hoping McClain's going to flip. Obviously, my core audience are University of Miami fans. For the Canes fans listening to this and watching this, I don't want you guys to freak out because, at the same time, my colleague Brian did come out of his conversation with Cormani expecting McClain to sign with the Hurricanes. He doesn't think McClain is trolling Miami. He does think he's going to make good on his pledge to Miami. So take that for what it's worth. But here's what McClain said to Brian yesterday when Brian spoke to him one-on-one. That man calls me every day, McClain said with a wry smile and a laugh, talking about Deion Sanders. He said, when asked directly about just announcing something to the public via social media about signing his letter of intent, so everything is out in the open, he mentioned January 15th as the date that he would sign. So he not only said that on ESPN, he not only said that to Manny Navarro a couple of weeks ago, he said that to allhurricanes.com as well yesterday, that January 15th is the date he will sign. And Brian goes on to say, what I said, that might be a grant in aid agreement. When asked about Miami, McClain also said that's where he's headed. So that's what he flat out told Brian Smith from allhurricanes.com and Fan Nation. He told him he's headed to Miami. That's what he said. Now, what he says versus what he actually does, we will see. But again, I know a lot of people freak out. They're like, every time he says Miami, people say, oh, he's lying. He's lying. For what it's worth, all the young man has ever talked about is Miami, okay? And here's another piece of it, because we've talked the last couple of days about Cormani McClain, the way he has interacted with Miami signees, Ruben Bain, who, Ruben Bain crushed it this past week at Under Armour, and Robert Stafford, who, if McClain does end up at Miami, he's going to be sharing a defensive backfield with Robert Stafford. They were on the same team at the Under Armour game. Robert Stafford is confident that McClain is coming. And I also saw a lot of videos of Cormani posing for photos and videos with Ruben Bain throwing up the U together. So, I mean, I know every time Cormani throws up the U, people are like, he's trolling. But for what it's worth, this young man is representing the U at every possible step. And Brian Smith also interviewed Robert Stafford. And Stafford was asked when he's enrolling at Miami, and Robert Stafford went out of his way to say, me and Cormani are enrolling in May, he said. So Stafford's not going to be an early enrollee. We already knew Cormani McClain will not be an early enrollee because he has not graduated high school yet. So according to Stafford, he and Cormani McClain are both enrolling in May at Miami. Another awesome reporter who's been all over this situation is Gabby Urrutia from Inside the U. And he wrote last night about Cormani, and McClain told Gabby and David Lake at Inside the U that Mario Cristobal and DeMarcus Van Dyke have nothing to worry about when it comes to his recruitment. And I mentioned McClain was photographed and videoed with signees Ruben Bain throwing up the U, Miami signee. He also showed up in a lot of photos with Miami fans who attended the game, throwing up the U with them. Now, obviously, none of that stuff, the photo ops and the gear that he's wearing, none of that really means anything until he sets foot on campus after officially signing with Miami. But here's what I have to wonder, and I'd love you guys to weigh in on this in the comments. You can tweet us at Locked On Canes. And if you follow us at Locked On Canes, we will follow you back. And if you tweet us, there's a good chance tweets could be read on the show. We've got a couple of Twitter questions we're going to answer today. Do you think Cormani McClain is really the type of person who would troll a school and their fans this hard for this long? I would like to think not. I don't know him personally. I do understand that he doesn't love doing media and he's not really that comfortable in an interview setting, which I think can cause people to overanalyze everything he does. I don't know him well enough to make that assumption that he's just been trolling Miami fans for the last couple of months. But as I told you, Deion Sanders literally calls him every single day. And until he actually officially signs with Miami or wherever, other schools are going to be openly recruiting him. So that's the risk. That's the bad. The good is he's telling everyone who he actually is willing to talk to that he will be enrolling at Miami. And he told Gabby and David from Inside the U that Mario Cristobal and Coach DeMarcus Van Dyke, DVD, have nothing to worry about. And if he really is going to put this all to bed on January 15th, our Cormani McClain watch will continue for another 11 days. And then hopefully 11 days from now, we got some other stuff to talk about. We will talk about some other stuff after this, though, because, man, I am so in love with Nicholas Harbor, the 5-star unsigned athlete who played in the Under Armour game yesterday. I hope Miami can find a way to lock this up. We've had what appears to be confirmation on a Miami Hurricane transfer portal arrival by his own father, who says he's coming. I want to get to that on the other side. And a transfer portal target Miami must go after. That and more here on Locked On Canes. Folks, if you haven't been all over Bet Online, I don't know what you're doing, especially with the title game coming up. Guys, Bet Online is the number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. I'm looking at TCU against Georgia on Monday, and wow, here's the numbers. I'm wondering if TCU can make a game of this because Georgia are minus 12.5 favorites here and minus 450 on the money line. TCU at plus 12.5. It would be an interesting play. Now, of course, Georgia had to scratch and claw their way to victory against Ohio State. TCU put on a shockingly good performance against Michigan. What's going to happen in this title game? TCU are big underdogs, 12.5-point underdogs, plus 360 on the money line. If you think TCU has a shot to keep it close or pull off the miracle, you can get really good odds on the Horned Frogs, my friends. So that's definitely something to think about. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season to basketball. We've got it all at Bet Online. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at Bet Online as well. We are always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting information. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. Bet Online, where the game starts. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. We are available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. So a number of people have asked me, like, Donno, what's your final prediction on Cormani McClain? Is he gonna make it official with Miami? Is he gonna put that U hat on again on January 15th? I don't think I will be able to give you guys a final prediction or a Donno ball on Cormani until probably the day of. Maybe right after he puts on the hat, I'll be able to tell you. But if you're asking me where I'm leaning, I do still give Miami, in my mind, about an 80% shot, if not 85%. It's not a slam dunk. His recruitment has been way too bizarre. I mean, it's been so unpredictable the way all of this has gone down. And then we have to wonder, are there administrative factors? How is the academic stuff kind of affected his status? There are so many things swirling around with Cormani McClain. It's made this process difficult to cover from a media standpoint. There are no slam dunks with Cormani, but I'm still thinking 80 to 85% he is a Miami Hurricane. Now, here's one that I would love to get at the U. Texas A&M defensive tackle Anthony Lucas has hit the transfer portal. 6'5", over 300 pounds. And wow, Texas A&M has just been bleeding members of that number one recruiting class that they had a season ago. He's the sixth member of their top recruiting class from 2022 to hit the transfer portal since the portal opened. He may not be the last. Now, defensive tackle Anthony Lucas. And first of all, we know how badly Miami needs D tackles. That's no secret. I like Thomas Gore. We're still looking for more. And Anthony Lucas, this is a former blue chip prospect coming out of high school. He's a former 4-star, borderline 5-star recruit out of Scottsdale, Arizona. He's considered to have first-round NFL draft potential. He was a top 60 overall recruit last year. I think he was 59th overall, according to 24/7, and 45 overall, according to On3. He was either the 8th or 10th rated, depending on which site you look at, defensive lineman coming out of high school a year ago. His first season, his only season at Texas A&M, he made 7 appearances, had 10 tackles, 1 tackle for a loss in those 7 appearances. So, didn't really have a monster year last year, but the future still seems very, very bright for this player. And so oftentimes when a guy hits the portal, especially just 1 year after coming out of high school, you don't usually have to look too far to consider where his options in the portal might lie. Because when you're only 1 year removed from the recruiting process, you tend to kind of go right back to the teams that were recruiting you out of high school. And along with Texas A&M, where he's departing from, the other finalists for Anthony Lucas last year were Alabama, Miami, Notre Dame, and Oregon. Now, Oregon and Miami, that was related because Cristobal had been recruiting him at Oregon and then started recruiting him in Miami. Remember, he's a Western guy being out of the state of Arizona. That was the guy that Cristobal had been recruiting at Oregon. And I haven't gotten any confirmation on this, like that this is definitely a Miami target, but how could he not be a Miami target? I would expect Miami to kick the tires, if not go hard, for Anthony Lucas. And we'll see if he starts to schedule visits and how this process goes for him. But with Miami still having a big time need at defensive tackles, and this guy being one of the best available in the country, and Miami was a former finalist for him, it just makes too much sense. And Anthony Lucas is a tremendous player. I mean, if you can come out of this transfer portal, having lost Darrell Jackson, which is a tough loss, and having lost Jordan Miller, not as tough of a loss, but then you can replace them with Thomas Gore and Anthony Lucas, you could argue you might end up coming out of this probably better than you were before. So that would be huge. And again, I don't know how much of a shot Miami has for Lucas, but I would imagine Miami has got to be aggressive for this player. Tremendous footwork and agility for a man his size, and he's probably still getting bigger. I know he was about 290 coming out of high school. He got to over 300 at Texas A&M. I'm not sure if he's like in the 305 range or the 330 range. We'll see what the measurements look like, but it's a no-brainer. Miami has got to go after this player. Going back to the Under Armour All America game, talking about high school recruiting, Miami is going to have a hat on the table for Nicholas Harbor, who, may be favoring potentially South Carolina, Michigan, Maryland. Oregon has gotten in the mix as well. He's visiting Oregon. So Nicholas Harbor, this is just a freak, an absolute freak when you're talking about a 6'5", 225-pound player who runs the 100-meter dash in just over a 10.2, which is almost Olympic caliber speed. He's that fast. He favors wide receiver, tight end. He played some defense in high school as well, some defensive end, but he wants to play offense at the next level, tight end or jumbo receiver. It would just make too much sense if he could end up at Miami. This guy could be Miami's Andre Johnson 2.0. If you want a more recent player comp, it would be DK Metcalf. He's got similar characteristics to DK, but Harbor is actually faster than DK Metcalf. So, if he can put all his skills together on the field, it's going to be insane. We got a comment on YouTube from a player, from a fan, a listener of ours who's a big fan of Harbor. Sean Andrews writes this to us on YouTube. He says, "I'm a Philadelphia Eagles fan. Harbor reminds me of A.J. Brown, but even faster. He would be a huge get. I just don't see him coming to Miami over LSU or Oregon because those schools have elite track programs." Now, that's an interesting tidbit because I talked about this yesterday. Admittedly, I am far from an expert on which schools have great track teams and which schools don't. I know Miami has a track team, and I think it's a pretty good track team, and Chris Johnson is going to run track here in addition to playing football. But I didn't know, like the other schools he's looking at, I didn't realize how good, like apparently Oregon and LSU have excellent, excellent track teams, and that's going to be a big consideration for Harbor, who still and wants to keep actively running track. But academics are also a consideration for Harbor. The young man wants to be a surgeon. That's what he wants to. He wants to be a surgeon someday. I guess like that's his plan B after the football career. Like when he's done playing football, he wants to be performing surgeries. Not that he would be in the medical school as an undergrad because he's not Doogie Howser. But Miami obviously has a great medical school, competitive pre-med majors. So the academic consideration with Miami's medical school and their science programs, that could be something that might make Miami an attractive player here. So there's more to his decision than just football. Track and academics have a big deal to do with that as well. I want to talk about, remember we have a couple of transfer portal visitors coming this weekend. Hopefully Anthony Lucas can join them. There's nothing confirmed with him, but I'd love to see him visit Miami. And I think one of those transfer portal visitors might very well end up picking the U. Let's talk about that when we come back here on Locked On Canes. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts, free on YouTube. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So we were talking on yesterday's episode about confirmed visitors who are going to be on campus this weekend visiting the University of Miami. And one of those is cornerback out of Iowa. And I know what you're thinking. Like, does Miami need corners that badly? They could use another corner, especially a veteran corner. And one of the players visiting is Terry Roberts, who's been, one of the better Big Ten corners the last couple of years out of Iowa. And he has just 1 year of eligibility left. He's in the portal. So he's looking to play somewhere for 1 year and hopefully make an impact and improve that NFL draft stock and, hopefully be part of a winning situation if it's down here at Miami. We'll have to see how that goes. And it's funny because we were talking about Terry Roberts on our show yesterday, and who happened to turn up in our YouTube live chat. And I was pretty well able to verify that he is who he says he is. Terry Roberts Sr. showed up. His father found our episode. Really, really nice guy. He was talking with all the fans in our live. And so, guys, make sure if you're watching a replay right now or listening to a replay, when we premiere these episodes on YouTube, we've got a live chat going, and you never know who or whose parents might show up in the live chat. Sometimes we get like celebrity sightings in there. And the father of transfer corner Terry Roberts showed up in our live chat, and he told us his son is going to be a Cane. That's what he says. Hopefully it plays out that way. He referred to his son as a lockdown corner, and he says that Miami fans are going to love him. And, obviously the only better source than Terry Roberts Sr. would be Terry Roberts Jr. But I would say if dad says he's going to be a Cane, there's a pretty good chance he's going to be a Cane. So Terry Roberts out of Iowa, he's 5'10", 182 pounds. His father says that he's been down to Miami before, so he's already kind of aware of the campus and the program. This won't be his first time in South Florida. And Roberts, he's a veteran Hawkeye defender. Per Gabby Urruti at Inside the U, he played over 200 snaps this past fall. He did get injured this past year, but played over 200 snaps, and he earned a very good 79.9 coverage grade. In 17 targets, he broke up 4 passes and intercepted another. He recovered 2 fumbles last year as well. So, it would be a bad thing to add some more veteran presence into that room. Miami is looking pretty good with incoming corners. We talked about Robert Stafford coming in, Damari Brown coming in. I think he's going to be excellent at the University of Miami. We'll see what happens with Cormani McClain, of course. Devontae Brown, the older brother of Damari Brown, is coming in the transfer portal. And if we can add Terry Roberts to that list, we're going to shore up that defensive backfield. And I think Terry Roberts, from what I understand, is also a very capable special teams player. So that could be part of the role that he fills at Miami as well. So, I mean, if Dad tells me he's coming, I'm thinking there's pretty good chance he's coming. We get a question from our pal Larry at Miami Media Associates on Twitter. He writes, it seems Mario Cristobal is not as good at transfer portal as he is in signee recruitment. It is interesting. FSU is now the king of the portal. Obviously, portal is good for short term, but I worry another 5-7 or 6-6 season will not be a good look for us. He asked me your thoughts. Well, it's funny because I think fans want to have it both ways, right? When Miami lands 15, 20 guys in the portal, you're like, you can't cheat recruiting. Portal, that's a shortcut. Real recruiting is the only thing sustainable. And then Miami goes out and gets a top 5 recruiting class out of high school, but they've only got 4 portal commits. And people are like, you're losing in the portal. Like, which is it? Now, I think partially, I think Larry answered his own question because the portal, it's more of a short-term thing. I will tell you that Miami, for the most part, there are some exceptions to this rule. Like Terry Roberts has just 1 year of eligibility left if he ends up at Miami. Thomas Gore just has 1 year of eligibility left. But the other portal signees or commits have been guys with multiple years left. And it seems like Miami is looking for guys with 2 or even 3 years of eligibility. That's the case with Francisco Mauigoa. That's the case with Javion Cohen. That's the case with Devontae Brown. They all have multiple years of eligibility left. And that to me makes sense because, I don't know if Miami's going to go 5-7 again. I hope not. I think Miami's going to be better record-wise than they were last year. But I do think that the Hurricanes are at least 2 years away from being a national contender, at least 2 years away. So, I think it's important to set yourselves up for the long term right now because you're not like 1 or 2 transfers away from being a national title contender. Maybe Florida State feels like they are. I mean, they were 9-3 last year in the regular season. Maybe Coach Norvell thinks, if we get a handful and they're killing it. Like Florida State's crushing it in the transfer portal. There's no question about it. They probably feel like they're a few players away. And, Jordan Travis, I think, is going to be a Heisman candidate next year at quarterback. So they probably feel like they're a few pieces away from contending for a championship. I think Miami is not. So I think Miami needs to be very selective of how you approach transfers. Try to get as many guys with multiple years of eligibility. And at certain positions where you don't, you just need to be plugging holes. Like defensive tackle has been a major hole. That's why you don't mind bringing in a guy like Thomas Gore, even though if he only has 1 year of eligibility to give. And also, in certain situations, you don't want to throw all of your true freshmen to the wolves, right? Because certain guys like Mauigoa and Okunlola and, possibly Jaden Wayne, Ruben Bain, right? There's a handful of guys who are probably ready to contribute serious playing time year 1, but then there are other guys who probably aren't, and you don't want to throw them to the wolves too quickly. So, and the other thing is, we don't necessarily know who's on Mario's big board in the transfer portal. So when you see certain players signing other places, not Miami, you assume we missed out on that guy. We don't know who's a target and who's not. Now, I know Dante Thornton is a target, the wide receiver out of Oregon. So if Miami doesn't land Thornton, I will consider that a loss because I know he's a target. If he signs for Tennessee or Auburn, Cal has been interested. Like if Thornton signs somewhere else, I will take that as an L for Miami because that's a guy I know is a target. But the other thing is, be patient with the portal because the portal is going to be open for another 2+ weeks. I think the 19th it closes. And then there's another portal opening in May. So 4 portal signees so far. We're not done. There's going to be more players coming in. So I'm not going to judge it till we have the full body of work to judge. And as always, guys, huge shout out for watching and listening to us today. Make sure you subscribe on every audio platform, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey. If you want to subscribe on YouTube, we appreciate that as well. And we will talk to you again tomorrow. Thank you for making us your first listen. Now make Locked On Sports Today your second listen. Peter Bukowski brings you the biggest stories from around the sports world in 20 minutes. Get the analysis and opinions before anyone else with our local and national experts and insiders. Locked On Sports Today podcast, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. We'll talk to you next time on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.